Do you always have one of those 8-year-old birthday feelings about now?
Oh,
Like,
sure.
you know,
Oh, for those watching who hear that question, they know, and those that especially know me, know my heart doesn't beat until the numbers start coming and until somebody like you shows up. So,
there you go.
Yeah, this is one of those things, one of those times. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And so I want to welcome everyone tonight for Palmer's Great Wednesday webinar series. We are thrilled and honored to be able to kick off this new year with our bishop, Bishop Andy Doyle. And we're thrilled that he is with us this evening. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro of Bishop Doyle. Bishop Doyle is the 9th Bishop of Texas, describes his 6-word autobiography as met Jesus on a pilgrimage, still walking. Bishop Doyle received his M.Div from Virginia Theological Seminary after receiving a fine arts degree from the University of North Texas. Previous to his election in 2008, Bishop Doyle served for 5 years as canon to the ordinary. He also served churches in Temple and College Station, as well as being elected deputy to several general conventions. He most recently served on the Structure Committee and is currently president of the Compass Rose Society, a global group of patrons and leaders making a difference in the Anglican Communion. Bishop Doyle's focus for ministry is service, evangelism, and reconciliation, planting 15 new churches and more than 50 new missional communities in the next 5 years. An avid reader and fly fisherman, Bishop Doyle has also written several books, often mixing references from pop culture, music, and movies with the latest in secular leadership trends in order to reach the broadest spectrum of readers and challenge Episcopalians to move their communities with the gospel in word and action. And his writings include Unabashedly Episcopalian, The Good News of the Episcopal Church, Proudly Episcopal, Church, A Generous Community Amplified for the Future, A Generous Community Being Church in a New Missionary Age, Small Batch, Local, Organic, and Sustainable Church, The Jesus Heist, Vocatio. Did I do that right?
Yeah.
So, Imaging a Visible Church, Citizen Faithful Discipleship in a Partisan World, Embodied Liturgy, and then, Embodied Liturgy, Virtual Reality, and Liturgical Theology and Conversation. It was a mouthful, lots of things going on.
Yeah.
All that aside, we are just honored and happy to be here tonight. And I also want to thank Neil Willard, rector of Palmer Memorial Episcopal Church, for always doing such a great job with these interviews. For those of you who want to ask a question for later, the way this will work, we'll have a conversation for about 40 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes, we will do a Q&A session. I will manage those questions, send those to me, and I will make sure they get into Neil. And we may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. Thank you so much. Thank you both. Enjoy.
Thanks, Roger.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bishop, this is really a great honor to be able to talk to you in this format. I think this will be a fun conversation. And I actually wanted to start off with something that's kind of lighthearted, but I don't think unimportant. And as you may know, in addition to our beloved rescue dogs, my family now also has a cat that showed up at Palmer's Rectory on the first Easter Monday of the pandemic. And I wasn't a cat guy, but this beautiful black cat showed up and she did not leave. She would not leave. And she said, I'm going to live here at Palmer's Rectory. And so we now have a cat. And I think that maybe not everybody listening to this conversation, but there are many people that know that you have cats, plural. Yeah. So how are the cats doing at the bishop's residence? And what do you most love about having pets when you get home at the end of the day?
Well, I've always had pets. I mean, since I was very young, my parents had dogs. So I grew up in a dog household, but we had rabbits and guinea pigs and hamsters and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was just a turtle. I had a turtle named Conquistador that would never die. He lived forever. We even traveled to Mexico with me in a cigar box, and So, which I'm sure is illegal at the time, but uh, just to say, I love pets, and Joanne was a cat person. And so when we began to date and then got married, we started to have cats. And the two cats we have inside today are Waffles, or sometimes called the Waffler, and Muffins, or Finn McCool. And then we have three outdoor cats that have adopted us, and that's Ghost and Miss Doubtfire and Tuxie Joe. And Ghost and Tuxie Joe are kind of pilgrims. Depending on what fare is available to them, they'll stop by.
Well,
and they're doing great. Thank you for asking.
Well, we're all glad to know that. And I was just looking behind you there. I see you have a lot of hats on that rack there. And I'm remembering back to many, many years ago, before I ever thought I would live in Texas. I think I saw you from a distance at a conference, and I thought, well, who is that guy in that suit with the boots? And he's wearing a hat. He's wearing a cowboy hat. Is there anything special about the hats you have behind you, or?
I grew up wearing a lot of different hats, and I just have collected them over the years, and I love to wear a hat. I think maybe it was a general convention, Neil, that you saw me. I just think it's good for people to know where the Bishop of Texas is, so as to either come close or stay away as per their desire, and so it's easy to spot with the man in the hat. But yeah, I love wearing one every day. And right now the one of choice is a black felt Stetson, open road. So yeah.
Great. Kind of in the moment we're living in, I'm thinking about this coming Sunday is going to be the annual parish meeting for Palmer.
Oh, right.
Start listening to other clergy, whether they're in the Diocese of Texas or they live across the country. And I'm thinking back to the clergy conference that we have, an annual clergy conference each fall. And at the last one where we were gathered at, you were talking to all the clergy. I can't remember if this was the fireside chat that is neither by a fireside nor a chat, but it was in some remarks you were giving. And you said to all of us who work in parishes that you don't think that things in our congregations post-peak pandemic, this is kind of the way I've been phrasing things, that you don't think things in our parishes will be truly settled until January of next year, not this January, but January of next year, January of 2024. And I really felt like maybe that was unexpected to hear, but it really did feel like it resonated with most of us in the room while we were in the middle of trying to read the tea leaves and figure things out last fall while we were at the conference, and even as we begin this new year. And I'm wondering if maybe you could say a little more about that as people in congregations, whether they're in the pews, but also in leadership, are wondering about the best ways to move forward as communities of Christians. Because I don't know how many people have that perspective that you shared with us.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just to remember that if we were to go back in history, it takes about 3 years to move through any kind of virus, it just takes a long time, and the repercussions of that take a long time. So we're just now this spring hitting that 3-year mark, which is hard to imagine because it just seems like we've been in it forever.
Right.
And so if we consider kind of the pace of change, and there's been a lot of change, whether we look at the different ways offices and employment has changed, the ways in which people are using their off time, things like the Great Wednesday, which is now virtual. All of these kinds of things are having effects throughout the organization. And my sense is that it's going to take a full year of living post this event that's going to show us kind of where we are. I think at that point you could say, okay, here's what the church looked like in 2019. At Christmas, we did all our numbers. We were done. Here's what it looked like. And then to jump forward and say, okay, so now this is where we are. And not to excuse what happened, but I just think we'll have some solid footing. Yeah. So So, until then, we just kind of keep trying the things that we need to try, and allow our curiosity about how to gather and how to be together to form and to push and pull us a little bit. And I think it's okay to start some things and say, no, that wasn't really what we need to go back to. Let's try this over here. And I just think it's going to be a time of curiosity and entrepreneurship as people are, figuring out what people have time for, what they really want to do, things like that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, when I think about over the past calendar year, it turned out that this point of this experience was different than how and I guess most of us were imagining it early on, because I think a lot of us were thinking, okay, we got to do this hard thing, and then we're going to look forward to kind of its end. And now there's just going to be like an end. There's going to be an end, and it's going to be important to mark that liturgically. It's going to be like the day of Pentecost. We're all going to be back. It's going to be awesome. Uh-huh. And that really didn't happen because it got extended for much longer than we thought. But then the end, things have improved so much, but the end wasn't like that original envisioning. It's been more gradual than,
Right. Well, and I don't think from a leader's perspective, I don't think you can really share. I don't think it's your responsibility to share with people your deep thoughts all the time. I don't think it's particularly helpful. And I think that in retrospect, it's probably not a surprise that it wasn't kind of a big thing, because people, as we all of us here tonight can remember, everybody had different views about what was supposed to happen, whether we were supposed to gather, not gather, wear masks, not wear masks. And none of those seemed to, if we had all felt freed, we might have all come back. But that wasn't a situation. You had some people who were eager to come back and some people who weren't. And just across the church, in some way, maybe it was easier to have us make all of the decisions. But I think in any natural disaster, in which this was, what we do is look for the moment to start handing things over, which makes it really hard on the leadership at the local level. And yet that empowerment it's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Like there's the hard pastoral work that has to happen, but then the leadership piece, the formative piece, as Episcopalians, we just don't give our bishops that much power. So, I think that all of that stuff began to come back in line, but it's all over the map, quite literally, across the diocese.
I certainly wouldn't say that it was, it obviously wasn't easy anywhere. So it wasn't easy here either. Although I do know that it was easier here because of our location being adjacent to the Texas Medical Center, and having so many people in the pews and in leadership who are connected in different ways to those institutions, and having an epidemiologist as a member of the congregation. And that certainly did make things easier than they would have been.
Yeah. But imagine, I just the expanse of the whole question, though. Mm-hmm. It seems now that Texas got a different strain than New York did. And if that ends up proving true, then we are very fortunate indeed, because New York, that was terrible. And we very much could have seen it. Now, it may be that because we live in neighborhoods and far apart, and our grocery stores are big, and all kinds of, maybe lots of factors in that. But it's just to say that the reality that we experienced in terms of COVID was very different from the rest of our friends around the world, and including in the Episcopal Church.
Well, kind of thinking about where we are now, as the overall public health situation proved, throughout last summer, Palmer moved into the fall. One of the things we were able to do is to invite Palmers to participate and have something to look forward to, which was a robust strategic planning process. And so we're in the middle of that right now. There's a third round of focus groups that are happening in the days leading up to the annual meeting. But that process, the kind of process that we're in, was made possible thanks first to some seed money from some generous Palmers, who supported the idea, if everyone in the congregation was invited to participate. But also, thanks to a grant from one of the foundations of the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. And I'm just thinking about that. I don't know all the different work that those foundations do. Can you give us some examples of different ways the diocese is able to spark creativity within congregations through those means? Because while that's been true for a long time, it seems to me that this current moment makes those resources even more valuable than they already were.
Sure.
Some opportunities maybe to experiment, or I don't know. What are some of the ways that you think?
Well, each of the foundations has its own kind of area that it's focused on, And, the one, I would suppose that the one that probably has the greatest is the Quinn Foundation. However, the Quinn Foundation, Episcopal Foundation of Texas, and the Great Commission Foundation have put funds together for entrepreneurial ideas about how to do mission work outside of the congregation. This parallels the work that Episcopal Health Foundation does in terms of looking at service opportunities outside the congregation. So one is very much focused at evangelism, smaller communities, Bible studies, things that happen outside of the campus, while the EHF funds are directed at service ministries and helping congregations to make connections in the wider in their wider context, along with work around racism. So both of these are opportunities. Another one is through the Talbot Fund, which looks at ways in which congregations may either memorialize a event around racism to say this terrible thing happened and we remember these people, or to celebrate a Black leader in the community. So, as an example, the church in Nassau Bay is putting their congregation sits right in front of a park that goes along the bay, and they're right down the street from NASA's entrance, and there's no monument to the African Americans who have served within NASA. And so they are putting up a monument on the edge of their property that will be seen by everybody who walks the trails.
Yeah.
So lots of creativity there about ways to heal and mend the past, or celebrate great leaders, African American leaders, which so often are overlooked. So, there's all kinds of ways we can think creatively together. And I think, as an example, the grant that we gave to help you all envision the future and what is in store for you all, those are dollars well spent, I think, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, and it seems it was needed beforehand, but even more so now. It just feels like it helps give people something. How are we going to tell our story in the world?
Right. It is so difficult for us, though, to think outside of what we know as church, and I think that's part of what people struggle with. And the other one is a fear of being successful. And I've said all along, to fail gloriously. It's wonderful to try something that's just amazing and has huge potential, because without trying it, you'll never know whether you can bring it about or not. But it's an opportunity that we should help each other take. And that's part of the Texas spirit in some way, to say, how do we do something new and creative? And
I was just reading there was an interview with Minnesota Public Radio that one of my former colleagues there, she was one of my former Southern colleagues that was up in Minnesota, and she's it's not the same kind of church, but it is analogous in its setting. She's at the Episcopal church that's adjacent to the Mayo Clinic.
Wow.
And it was interesting. They were talking about kind of her life and what they were going through, and a lot of it revolved around how they were going to use their buildings And they were it just got more intensive, that kind of conversation. It was just interesting to hear someone else's perspective on that. And thinking about kind of the way we're doing this right now, even this conversation, in the past, Roger Hutchinson has been involved in leadership of an organization called Forma, which is this network of Christian educators throughout the Episcopal Church. And Palmer's own Ryan Hawthorne, our curate, was actually giving she's at their big conference, and she was invited to be their opening preacher for the conference last night. And so I'm sure that they're having a lot of conversations at that gathering about the future of Christian formation in our parishes and how to do it now and what's going to look like in the future. And so, that's already affected things here at Palmer. We're doing this way. Really, our Bible studies have been extraordinarily successful in terms of, they're robust, but they're in person, and that they're hybrid meetings. And so people gather online, and they'll check in whether they're in Sugar Land or they're in England or someone's standing in the middle of the forest. And we've had Palmers do all of that at different times. Do you have any sense of how Christian formation might look different in the future, or what the focus might be? Do you think, in kind of the sense of, in a way, a lot of people feel like they're replanting congregations or rebuilding them, or do you think there'll be a renewed focus on basic things about, just how to pray, how to read the Bible, how to think about your life theologically? I mean, we do those things anyway in different ways, but do you think there might be a renewed emphasis on that? Or
I think that, of course, she's participating in our formation study for the diocese, and right now we're just studying some different ways in which to enliven Christian formation. Not everybody has robust programming or offerings, and so we're trying to think or consider how to. Are there things that people can pull off the shelf and use? Are there ways in which we can improve this? I think a couple of things about this. The first is this: I still believe that we have to press forward into front-facing and internal website design. And what I mean by that is people searching for churches online or as self-learners would love to find information about Palmer, let's say, or any Episcopal church, and how are you related to the wider church, and all kinds of things. What's your outreach look like? All of these pieces, and that people are going to continue to look online, not just at our worship and preaching, but also to learn about us and to learn about our faith tradition. The problem is that mucks up a normal website if the website's designed for everybody who goes to church already.
Right.
So I really do believe that there are these two pieces that need to work together, and that one of them feeds information to invite, welcome, connect folks, so that online, kind of from a distance, people can connect and feel safe in asking questions about their faith to people who are willing to work with them. That being said, I think that actual teaching around basic foundations, as you said, are going to be core. Part of that is just people, the number grows dramatically every year of those who have no sense of what we offer in terms of spiritual development. They may have a lot of ideas about things that are presented out in the world or other traditions, but they don't know about what we offer and the diversity of those offerings in terms of spirituality and contemplation, prayer practices, and the mystics, and all kinds of folks. So I do think there's a lot that we have to learn about formation for both the self-seeking and self-learner in our midst, and also for those who want to go deeper with these hybrid classes.
I remember in a past church setting once where there was a clear division. People inside the church wanted the church website to basically look like the British Museum, like with minutes of every meeting that was ever held, and people outside the church wanted something simpler and cleaner they weren't navigating every artifact that was
right.
But it's sometimes hard for people to put themselves in other shoes. But the other thing about telling your story, one of the most common things that some newcomers will say about Palmer is that we're kind of like a hidden treasure. Like they come, it's like, I didn't know that there was a church like this. Or you can have this and like be okay with X, Y, and Z, or you have same gender marriage, or you're, there's this kind of a frame of mystery around things. You don't always have the answers to every question. But I feel loved here or receive grace. But so it's like they wish they had known about it sooner or some other way, or and how that can be done to the website. We probably need to be more creative about that.
Well, and I think too that the way in which we think about the church building and access and some of those things will change too. I think that we should become more aware or figure out how to be present for pilgrims who are walking and is this open for prayer? Those are pretty big, daunting doors. But just the question, could I come in there and pray by myself? That we've gotten so protective over our spaces too, and yet what I see in terms of large traditions, I mean, this doesn't have to be solved tomorrow, but what I see in terms of large, not tradition, but large kind of sweeping things is that this moment more and more looks like a time when people went into a church to pray. They might not normally go to that church. They might only go to that church on Christmas and Easter. But that a sacred space is going to become more important as internal space and online space grows. Then next to being able to get on a plane and go on a pilgrimage, people are going to look for sites. And I just think how we treat our buildings as open pilgrim sites for people is going to be a way in which, and so that means how do we host that, and what does it mean to have a docent and some things like that. And I think those are going to be will need to be future considerations.
That's interesting. And like even at Palmer, this has been talked about by several people, and we've actually looked into it. In an ideal world, we'd love to have like glass doors in the front so you can see the inside, because people are always walking by. The challenge is the small narthex and the fire code, because the doors have to open out, not in. And so anyway, but it would be wonderful to be able to have more access to the church, especially like in our location.
Yeah. And so I don't, those are all parts of what does it mean to be down there as a church on the edge of those two campuses, or we've talked about that for years. And I just think those are changing. Those things are changing. And
there's a lot of anxious people that walk by our church for good reasons.
Right.
They're worried about their loved ones or themselves, or
people who ran by on the marathon
that was so much fun.
Right. That was awesome. It's so wonderful. And I love that particular expression of blessing people as they come, water and everything. It has it's so good. But one wonders, how many of them run by on their way through the park or something like that too.
Sure.
So, and people have always solved this with different things: chapels, outdoor chapels, all kinds of things. Lots of ways to do it. But it's just to say, I think that we're going to see less. I think we're going to see less people on every Sunday. I mean, we're already seeing it. So in my time in ministry, probably yours, some 8 years or whatever it is, we've moved from twice a month to once a month, to once a quarter. And I don't see those numbers. I don't see the habit of culture switching that fast.
And a lot of people, I think, even if that's how the pattern they've fallen into, they don't really understand that in the larger picture. Or why don't they see other people? Well, they're there on the other Sundays. You're you're not there. It's just kind of like it's an unusual way to try to knit community together.
Right. And so consequently, thinking about ways in which we've always knit the community together, right? Which is special observances, prayer groups, meals, right? That those are the ways, service opportunities we can do together. So those are important to just, I think it's all just about discernment and curiosity. I think there's, again, a lot of stuff's got to be tried and see what works, and what works for you at the, in that particular context isn't going to work for the cathedral or St. Mark's or, things that are just down the road, quite literally from you, will have completely different contexts and ways of doing things.
Well, that's true, because like even certain night activities don't work as well at Palmer as they do with a church not that far away, but in a different setting.
Sure.
It's it can start to get a little deserted over here in this corner of the world as the sun sets.
Well, just think, I mean, the church in Jacksonville, every Thursday, small little church, but every Thursday, 10 of the parishioners go to a potluck dinner, or not potluck, but I guess it's a barbecue or chicken or something for the boys club in town. And this is one of the ways they do ministry outside of themselves. They get a little,
they're out in the community.
But it's a tiny town where there's, that's like, so it works there. But if we were to suggest that for you all, that's crazy. So, and that's what I mean. I just think the brilliance of it is, I think we get to watch and experiment and try, and that I don't think the scripture tells us that they all went out and were immediately successful.
Right.
And certainly the disciples, Moses had a hard time letting go of the reins when Jethro told them to do so. Jesus replicates that same kind of sending out, and as they come back, they all have different experiences. Some of it worked, some of it didn't work, all kinds of things. So it's I find it an exciting time for us.
Well, let me ask you this, because everybody's wrestling with all these heavy things and all, but in the midst of that, and we always have needed this, but we need times, however brief, for refreshment, whether that's something that's spiritual for ourselves or creative or playful or whatever. And so I think that you and your role as a bishop are no different than the rest of us in that regard. And so could you share with us maybe something fun and non-churchy that you've done recently to hit the reset button for yourself?
You already know this, but it is probably the most recent thing. I took up banjo. So I started banjo last year, about this time, about now, and I've played banjo, and then I started taking some guitar lessons as well, because I was enjoying the playing again, and I hadn't really played anything since college, when I was working at Camp Allen and stuff like that, kind of youth group music and stuff. So I very much enjoyed that. It's a completely different part of my brain that's at work, and I enjoyed that challenge a lot. So yeah, that's probably the newest thing I've done to create some fun space for me. But I find that that's essential. I have to have some creative space, or else I'm pretty grumpy.
But you have an artistic side. I mean, I don't know if everybody knows that. Do you still paint, or is that sort of?
I haven't for a while. It takes a lot to kind of get into it, and once I get into it, I'll do it for a while, and then the rest of it ends up being doodles on paper and stuff, things like that. So I do like it, and still love. I was telling Joanne, as we've reached the age where we have, part of the thinking about banjo was thinking about retirement. I'm not going anywhere soon, but what does life look like after the Diocese of Texas for me? And so the banjo is part of it. And I was saying, I would love to take a class in the evening and maybe, or during the day. My gosh, I'll be able to take class. But so I think that is just to say, while I'm not eager to go anywhere, that
right.
the back of me, there are pieces that say, oh, wow, how fun to be able to think about that or to do that in a more intentional way in the future. So, yeah, I mean, it's all still there. And I love doing it. Every once in a while, I'll do something, just kind of get something out and paint.
Well, as you know, I worked for Holly Hollerith, whom you know from the House of Bishops, and of course his non-churchy activity build steam engines, and
right,
he wasn't thinking about church when he was doing steam engines.
That's right.
Now, another place where your creativity comes out is actually your vehicle, and there's a question I really want to ask you, because it's my understanding that once at a church that may or may not resemble the one that I'm sitting in, that a security guard tried to shoo you away from a parking space that was clearly marked, and I quote, reserved for the bishop.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I seem to recall that there was a lot of laughter about this for the rest of the day, at least in the people that I know.
There's not, first, part of what's really nice when I go to my lessons is to be told that I'm doing something wrong. And that so the Bishop of Texas should always receive at least multiple times a week an opportunity to be humbled. And it is a humbling thing, but it's also funny. Yeah, I don't think people expect me to show up in my Jeep with all of its gear on it and decked out for the trails. But yes, I have been asked to move my car because the bishop is coming. And I did have one old lady from a congregation, and she would describe herself in this. She said, I was just sitting here and I'm just so old. I just said, who's that punk parking in the bishop's parking lot? Somebody go take care of him. So and then it turned out it was me. She was so anyway, it's
this
like
has happened in more than one place. See, I didn't know.
Yes, it happens.
This happens a lot. Okay, well, that's hilarious. Okay.
It does.
Okay.
It does. So anyway. The trials, the tribulation of the bishop. So,
that's
I
awesome.
probably should put some Episcopal flags like on the front so that when I come in, people go,
yeah.
oh, right. There's the bishop's car, or get a driver or something. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Betty Key says there's some old ladies listening. Well, they are very wise.
That's the question I really wanted to ask you all evening.
But this is interesting. So I just had my first visit to North Texas.
Yeah.
Official Sunday visit.
Everybody may not know what that means.
We have received the Diocese of Fort Worth into the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. So we now, those who remained with the Episcopal Church are now part of our diocese. And so I made my first visit. Really, it was a strange thing because I'm just going on a visit, and then I'm kind of standing there in the middle of it all thinking, this is the first time the crozier has been to this part of Texas since Bishop Gregg carried it to this part of Texas. Wow. And planted churches here. And so that was a powerful moment, but I'm not sure they knew what to do with me. You all have come to terms with living with me for the last 15 years. And I think they were a little bit surprised over it all. And I just think sometimes we forget that I'm not quite like other bishops. And right. So, there it is.
But you do carry that crozier, that historic crozier. I remember it's maybe its first visit to my office when I was here. I think it was the first visit. A, I didn't realize how heavy it was, but B, you stood up against the wall, and next thing I know, it fell over. So it needed a little bit of
I had to replace
loving care afterwards. Yes, but it survived, and I know it's been through a lot.
Yeah.
What is that like to, I mean, I love history, and I know that you probably read a lot about the history of where you're rooted and where you minister and all. What is it, what does that mean to you to like hold an object like that that's not it's not yours?
Right. It's not mine.
Not yours, yeah.
I think that we all have moments of revelation about our place in the world. And I have, from the very beginning, and for instance, that Sunday, felt a great privilege to be invited by the diocese to hold this diocese for a while. And holding that crozier is a reminder of the tenuousness of our relationship. And time will come when I will retire, and then it'll be time for a new person. And that will be exciting to me. It won't be sad.
Right.
One of my favorite pictures is having the 3 living bishops hand me the crozier at my installation at the cathedral, that kind of sign that they each carried it, and they're handing it to me, and it's the season in which I will be the shepherd. But then the shepherd will retire to the shepherd's hut somewhere and on a mountainside, I imagine, and a new shepherd will come. And that, but it is and I miss people who have died in this season, who've been close and who have been important members of our diocese, and have come to love so many who I've known over the 15 years. And watching a generation of people who I've known since I was 15 here retire and die. And I don't mean to be sad. It's just a gift. It's a privilege, like pastoring a church for a long time. Don't you think? I mean, in that, I mean, it's like, okay, I confirmed their grandchildren, and I baptized their baby. I did, I mean, it's a powerful thing to be invited to play this particular pastoral role, and that staff is a constant reminder of that.
Yeah, I remember actually something Holly Hollerith told me right before I moved, from a church in Virginia to a church in Minnesota, and he said, you're going to go there, and first couple of years you do the things you're supposed to do because of who you are and so forth. But then he said a couple of years later, you find yourself standing in the church presiding over a funeral of someone that was really your friend, and it almost hits you unexpectedly. Like all of a sudden everything's different then.
Right.
Yeah.
We celebrate the joys and the sadness and the life to come with all of our people. It's one of the greatest jobs in the world.
It
whether
is.
you're a deacon, priest, or bishop.
One of the questions that someone asked about was, have you seen an example of maybe one thing or different things people have tried during the pandemic that were successful in terms of church growth?
Well, what I would say is that fellowship, gathering, celebratory moments are key. So you looking at places where people can come back. So and then really spending some energy around those. You can't do that every Sunday. Because it'll wear yourself out. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But pouring as you do our the words into and work into Holy Week, for instance, and Easter, not just Lent, but that Holy Week and Easter is going to be a time where people, old Palmers and new Palmers and not yet Palmers, will all see this as an opportunity to come to church. And so how will you do that? And the places that I see being successful are not just doing Christmas and Easter, but looking at other celebratory moments in the life of the church and its context in which they can do something special to invite people to come in. And I just think that's the season.
Great, thank you. So someone else, it's interesting what people notice. I had noticed the hats behind you, and someone else has been scanning the room behind you and notice you seem to be pretty serious about your records and things like that.
Yes.
Is there a particular music type or style or genre that really in particular moves your spirit? Or tell us about all that that's around you.
Yeah, so I got into collecting vinyl after we cleared out my mom's storage unit and found all my old records. I was like, oh wow, look at these are terrible. And so I started. My mom gave me a record player to get started, and I started collecting. And so what I collect is 60s and 70s rock and roll with a arm of blues, most of which was the blues that early rock and roll musicians were listening to, including later musicians like the Rolling Stones and others like that. So I have a pretty good blues collection and Texas blues collection. And then I love funk, and so I've got some a small little funk collection where rock and roll kind of played in that genre. Yeah.
Now I have a question. So most days I take both of our boys to school. But I feel a little neglectful as a father because I believe that you elevated that to a different level. And I'm embarrassed to admit I don't do what I think you actually use that as instruction time. Did you not? Or am I making this up? I'm remembering
we did. Yes, okay. We did. We made this. This was School of Rock, and every day we
on the way to school.
On the way to school. So I started out with the collections of recorded field worker songs and old songs that had been connected to slave songs in the fields, and then brought that through blues, and then to early rock and roll, and then all the way up to the 2000s. So yeah, it took 3 years. It was amazing. I started it and thought, oh, this will be fun. I had taken a blues class in college. It'd be great. And then it became a lot of fun, and I learned so much.
When you were talking about kind of gathering events, someone's reminding me that we did an experiment. We actually did an experiment last year on Shrove Tuesday. Rather than having an event in the parish hall, we had a public party in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
We had, there were like 3 food trucks here, and there was a band in the, I think it was jazz, sort of jazz-like music in the courtyard, so people could go in there if they wanted to. So not only our folks, but people walking into and out of the medical center could stop by. So we're doing that again, but that was really a new thing. And I honestly, I wonder if we would have even thought of that had it not been for the pandemic,
right?
Because there were a lot of different reasons for doing it outside.
Yes, right. Exactly. Isn't BB in a band like a 1980s?
Yes, a 1980s band, right? And we've had a Beatles cover band here before for Covenant Sunday, things like that.
What I will tell you is, and this is probably good to add on add on to this. And this is long-term work.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started out, you were still able to get, I don't even know if you can do this now, I can't imagine, but you could get addresses for everybody who signed up for new utilities. And we would invite them to come to our church, and then we would send a special invitation to Christmas and Easter. And it wasn't until the third year that we began to see people come because of those. So it's just to say, I think it takes a really long time for people out there in the world to recognize you've done something new. So I say that so that you don't get disappointed expecting immediate results. It just takes a while to build a base of people who come to expect this and then maybe sign on for something else. So anyway,
interesting. Someone has a question about back to virtual communities, and this is the question is about so separate from this question, you have been a big proponent of like missional communities that are not like Palmer's an attractional church. There are other types of smaller communities that they live in the world differently than the way Palmer does.
Right.
And this is a question really about yet a different way of that. Do you envision communities that are virtual being recognized as an entity?
So I don't know. We are on the verge of helping to fund a online monastery to try just to see. It's gotten some traction globally, so but the people who've been funding it can't do it anymore. So we're looking at whether we want to take it on and are excited about the possibility of doing that. That being said, I think on the one hand, yes, I think we need to have virtual communities. 100% yes. Churches, attractional church, everybody should have online communities. I think it's going to be a part of what we do. That being said, our church, the Episcopal Church, is an incarnational church, which means that all of that, no matter what it is, should help shape disciples who come together to both do good works with each other in the world, hands-on, who come together to share what they have and come together to worship. So I don't think that in the long run, there will be a push to do this, but in the long run, I don't think you can have Christian community without bodies present. So we will have virtual kinds of Christian community, but they will always lead to real relationships in the world of bodies. Now, if I'm wrong about that, I'd be really sad. But that's what my embodied liturgy is about. By the way, that book, it's a little philosophical in the beginning, but this is not, I mean, it's, talking about AI and whether or not we can upload ourselves into the computer and live forever. These are all things that are being talked about in the philosophy of consciousness, neurobiology, and other things. So these are all out there. So this is a great question.
I hesitate to bring this up, but of course, what I'm thinking of right now are those intense conversations that arose pretty early in the pandemic about how to do communion or not do communion, and how to think about that. I was just talking with someone this week about that. I could certainly imagine years from now enjoying being a part of an online Bible study of people from many different places, maybe a small group of people, but that would be set beside, stretching out my hand somewhere to receive communion.
Right. Right. No, we in preparation for Lambeth, I was convener,
Okay.
Bible study convener, and we had a Bible study of 8 people, and we met once a month on Thursday for a Bible study for 6 months. So it was fantastic, actually, and many of those groups are continuing. So,
and we could never have done that not that long ago,
no,
or we wouldn't have.
We wouldn't have thought. We wouldn't have thought it was
thought to do
necessary.
it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we wouldn't have thought it was necessary. So
Interesting.
yeah.
All right. The third guy with the beard popped on here. And I want to say thank you on behalf of Palmer, on behalf of the vestry and staff and congregation. Thank you, Bishop, for being here. I also want to say thank you on behalf of Christian educators across the country and across the world. I've shared this, and you know this to be true, but this has been one of the most difficult times and challenging times for people who are in roles like mine. And I'm not trying to be whiny. I just sort of share the truth that this is challenging when all of the ways that to get people to be a part of a community and come together to learn, those don't quite work the same. And so I love the creativity. I feel like you just gave all Christian educators and clergy a little bit of a hug, and I appreciate that support. I'm also thankful to be a part of a congregation like Palmer, who is game and willing to try some new and different things. And so thank you for that. I do also want to share with everybody who's coming up next. Speaking of creative and amazing, we have Lenicia Rouse Tinsley, who is a visual artist, multi-disciplinary artist. She's amazing. Will be joining us in February. In March, we have Mallory McDuff, who is a professor at my alma mater, Warren Wilson College in North Carolina. She's also the author of Our Last Best Act, Planning for the End of Our Lives to Protect the Places and People We Love. And I'm going to go ahead and say the rest just so folks can kind of know this is coming. We're thrilled. In April, we have Julia Marie Cecilia Ayala Harris, who is president of the Episcopal House of Deputies, will be joining us in April. And then in May, we have theologian Dale Allison Jr., Dearborn Professor of New Testament from Princeton. So
now I'll tell you that puts me, I'm like, my station just went up next to those.
It's a pretty good group.
It is. Now, really quickly though, this is, you have to ask, because the president of the House of Deputies and I were on a little committee along with the current vice president of the House of Bishops and the current president of the House of Bishops, Michael Curry, along with a number of others who now are bishops in the church. So I'll be curious that we were on Trek together.
Okay.
The future of the church. And I
remember that.
Right. And so I think it's funny.
I don't have time to ask you whatever happened to that.
Oh my. But just to say, I think it's fascinating, right? Then to kind of step back and go, well, where are people?
Yeah.
And Sean Rose, the parliamentarian, Mary Gray Reeves is the vice president, Michael Curry is the presiding bishop. So what it really is kind of an amazing group to see where people have landed in terms of leadership. And regardless of what happened with Trek, obviously that conversation has continued to shape people's leadership. And so what a great group of people, and what fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And Neil, great job as always. To the folks who gathered tonight, we're grateful that you were here and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.